My son and DIL said I could stay if I pay rent. This isn't a charity, Mom, they said. 3 days later, the landlord handed me the keys and my son an eviction notice. I bought the whole building. Are you out of your goddamn mind? Bringing garbage into my house again? That was the first thing she said. No hello, no offer to help, just those words, flung like knives across the front yard in the searing Florida heat. The sun was at its cruelest that afternoon, baking the pavement until it shimmered like boiling water. I had just come back from the market, 2 miles round trip, in heat that pressed on your chest like grief. My arms trembled from the weight of the plastic bags. But I carried them anyway, like I always did, because someone had to. Inside were 2 bruised apples, a discounted carton of eggs, a day-old loaf of bread, and a small container of milk. Not much, but enough. Enough to feel useful. Enough to feel like I still mattered. My daughter-in-law stood on the porch, with one hand on her hip, a glass of something pink and sweating in the other. She glared down at me like I had insulted her with my existence. "We need fresh food, not whatever expired trash you're dragging in from God knows where," she continued, her voice rising, slicing through the thick air. "This is not a museum. And you're not some priceless artifact. If you can't contribute, you can leave." Her words echoed through the cul-de-sac. A dog barked once. A screen door creaked shut 2 houses down. The wind didn't even dare blow. I was halfway across the yard, steps away from the porch I helped paint the summer my son turned 10, when he stepped out. My son, my only child. He looked tired, not from work, but from contempt. Tired of seeing me. Tired of the burden he had volunteered to carry, then decided to drop when it no longer made him look good. "Mom," he said, not meeting my eyes, "we talked about this. We're not a damn charity. Go guilt someone else." Then he dropped my suitcase at my feet. It was old, brown leather, the same one I brought with me when I first moved in after my husband passed. The handle had cracked years ago, and I had stitched it back with dental floss because the nylon thread had run out. Now it burst open from the force of the drop. Clothes tumbled out, my nightgown, my house slippers, and a single framed photo, our wedding day, 1965. The glass cracked down the center, right across Thomas's smile. No one moved to pick it up. I bent slowly, knees aching, and gathered it into my hands. The frame was warm from the sun. The broken glass nicked my finger, and a small bead of blood pooled beneath the surface. I wiped it with my thumb, then reached into my apron pocket and pulled out the embroidered handkerchief I'd carried since my first anniversary. I wrapped the photo gently, like something sacred. "Maybe she'll finally get it through her head," my daughter-in-law muttered, turning back toward the house. "Old doesn't mean owed." I did not speak. I did not look up. I simply took the hem of my blouse and wiped the sweat from my neck, straightened my spine, and lifted the suitcase one more time. No one offered help. I took one last look at the house, my house once, and walked slowly down the street. Past the mailbox where I used to leave treats for the mailman. Past the flower bed they let die because they said flowers attracted bees. Past the porch swing that now sat rusting, the cushions torn, the memories fading. I sat at the bus stop. The metal bench scorched my thighs through the fabric of my skirt. I looked down at the grocery bag and the handkerchief in my lap, and I felt something stir. Not rage, not even sadness. Conviction. They thought they had rid themselves of a burden. They thought I was a relic. They thought I was disposable. They had forgotten what I used to be. Who I still was. A planner, a builder, a woman who never forgot the fine print. And they had just declared war on the wrong artifact. Before they called me a burden, before they acted like I was some fragile relic wasting space, I was a woman who built futures for other people. Not that anyone in this house ever cared to ask. Years ago, before I married Thomas, I was a senior financial consultant at one of the most competitive investment firms in the state. I handled portfolios worth more than most people see in 5 lifetimes. My name was on more legal documents than I could count. I was the one men in Navy suits called when they were afraid their fortune would vanish, and I always knew how to save them. But I never wore that life on my sleeve, not once. Because the moment I married Thomas, I chose to step aside, not because I had to, but because I loved the way his face lit up when he felt like he was leading. I let him take the spotlight. I walked a step behind, not because I was weak, but because I believed in shared dreams. He called me the quiet architect of our life, and that was enough. We didn't have much at first. His mechanic's salary and my part-time work barely covered rent. But we built a home anyway, one made of patience, casseroles, and late-night budgeting at the kitchen table. When he passed, suddenly and far too young, I thought the world might split in half. But grief is a quiet teacher. It showed me that love does not end. It just changes form. I raised our son alone. No child support, no family to lean on. Just me and the boy I swaddled in blankets. Thomas never got to see him outgrow. I sewed his Halloween costumes from scratch. I worked Saturdays and Sundays. I skipped dental appointments for myself so he could have braces. And every time he outgrew his shoes, I let mine wear thin. I made sacrifices. Not the kind you write about in books. The kind no one thanks you for, but that hold the roof over your head. When the housing market crashed and prices bottomed out, I took what little I had, every penny saved from 40 years of quietly stretching dollars, and bought a small condo in a decent part of town. It was not glamorous, but it was stable. It was home. When he got married, I wanted to give them something more than congratulations and a blender. I wanted them to feel secure. I wanted them to start strong. So I did something most would call foolish. I transferred the deed to my son's name. The condo I bought with blood and frugality I signed over, trusting that the foundation I'd built would become theirs. At the time, my daughter-in-law cried. She hugged me and said I was a second mother to her. She told me I would always have a place in their home. "This is your home too," she said. "You'll always have a room here." I believed her. I believed her when she bought a rocking chair and placed it by the window for me. I believed her when she asked me to teach her how to make Thomas's favorite meatloaf. I believed her the way widows believe in warmth when the sun finally comes back after a long gray winter. But slowly that warmth turned into something else, a chill. It started with small exclusions, family dinners where my seat was mysteriously missing, outings where I was told last minute that the restaurant wasn't wheelchair-friendly, even though I do not use a chair. Then came the suggestions that I declutter, which meant my photo albums, my crochet sets, the record player Thomas saved for 2 Christmases to surprise me with. The room that was once always yours became a catch-all for laundry and unopened Amazon boxes. Then one morning, I found a real estate brochure on the kitchen counter. 3-bedroom units, modern, open plan, perfect for young families. My heart stopped when I saw the sticky note stuck on top, what we could afford if Mom moved out. They did not even bother to hide it. Still, I stayed quiet. Still, I cooked dinner. Still, I left little notes on the fridge reminding them to drink more water and check the mailbox. Because that is what women like me do. We try. We bend until something breaks. The day they told me I would have to pay rent, I laughed. I thought it was a joke. But they were serious. "This is not a charity," she said. "You can't just live here for free." "Not with how tight things are," my son added, looking at his shoes. I had not missed a single utility bill in my life. I had bought this house. I had cooked every meal in that kitchen since before they were married. Now I was just a mouth to feed, a ghost in their guest room. So I gave them what they wanted. I packed up what little they had not already reorganized, and I left. But what they failed to remember was that while I had given them the deed, I had never stopped being a strategist. They saw a soft old woman. I saw a plan with an end date. Because even now, even as they whispered behind closed doors about getting rid of me, I remembered every word of the will, every tax document, every clause and caveat that protected the person who had created the legacy. Me. They thought they had the power, but they had forgotten whose signature was on everything they claimed to own. There are wounds that bleed out in a moment. And then there are the slow ones, the cuts you do not see right away, the kind that come from silence, from indifference, from betrayal dressed in errands and accidents. I first noticed things going missing the week after the thermostat stopped working. That is what they told me. But I knew it was more than that. My sewing machine, the one Thomas bought me when I said I wanted to start my own tailoring shop, vanished from the hallway closet. My tea set, the bone china with the blue roses that only came out on anniversaries, gone from the cabinet. My first edition books sold off apparently at a local flea market for space. When I asked, she rolled her eyes. That stuff was just collecting dust. We needed room for the new air fryer. Dust, that is what I had become. Something to wipe away, to make space. I found the flyer in the recycling bin, a glossy brochure for Shady Palms Elder Care Facility. Someone had circled a suite in red marker. Underneath, written in my daughter-in-law's curling script, "Next quarter availability, ask about transport assistance." When I brought it to my son, he barely blinked. "It's not like we've made any decisions yet," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Decisions?" I asked. "About my life?" "It is not personal," he muttered. "But that is the thing about betrayal. It always is." Then came the meeting. It was a simple neighborhood gathering. Every quarter a few of us meet at the community center to go over upcoming events, bylaws, and who is behind on dues. I had been on that board longer than most of them had lived on the block. I always brought cookies. I always voted. I always showed up. But that day I showed up confused because someone had tampered with my hearing aids. The batteries had been removed. I noticed too late, just as I stood to speak. I opened my mouth to read the minutes, but all I heard was muffled laughter. I called someone the wrong name. I answered the wrong question. I repeated myself. They laughed. My daughter-in-law watched from the side of the room, smiling into her phone, like she was texting about me. I saw her type something. Then my son laughed. Not out loud, just a puff of air, a smirk, and a shake of his head. Later that night, I overheard her on the phone. "She is like a haunted doll," she said. "You move her, but she just shows up again. I swear to God, she gives me the creeps." A haunted doll. That was who I had become in their eyes. That night I overheard them laughing. Not just at me, but about me. "She is old, blind, and almost deaf," my son said, his voice relaxed in the way cruelty becomes when it feels unchallenged. "We move her out, flip the unit, and use the cash to finally go to Europe. And get the car I want," my daughter-in-law added, "with heated seats. I am so done with driving her around like a chauffeur." They toasted. To my disappearance. Not the woman who raised him through a recession. Not the woman who taught him how to tie his first tie. Not the woman who stayed up with him the night before he failed his driver's test and still told him she was proud. No. I was now a dusty ornament in the corner of their life, one they were too embarrassed to explain to their friends. And still, I did not leave. Not yet. Because some ghosts do not disappear. Some ghosts remember everything. I always believed that patience is a kind of power, even if it is quiet. And patience fed me the moment I realized nothing good was going to change unless I made it. So I hired the investigator. Not the flashy kind with sunglasses and burnt coffee breath, but a discreet professional, a young woman named Claire, who understood that privacy and proof go hand in hand. I gave her the address, the names, and a whisper of what I suspected. They were planning to sell the place without telling me, maybe even mortgage it behind my back. I gave her as much detail as I had, my name, their names, the times they kept going into the safe deposit box at the property office. Claire asked one question before she agreed. "Are you sure?" she said. "If this is real, it will change everything." "It already has," I told her. In the following week, she confirmed it all. The condo deed had been pledged as collateral to repay a personal loan they never told me about. Creditors had liens filed, thousands in overdue gambling debts, plus some medical bills I never saw in my name. Claire found posts online advertising estate items for immediate sale. Picture frames, linens, antique sewing machines, my things. "They're emptying this place," Claire said softly. Then I took my own steps. I ordered 3 tiny recorders, one for the kitchen, one for the garage, and one tucked inside the bathroom vent behind the living room. I placed them strategically, near the counter where they argued, under the sink cabinet where she stored documents, inside the garage near the electric panel. I did it late at night so they would not suspect, and then I waited. I sat at the kitchen table, pretending to read cookbooks. I made tea in the mornings. I dusted the counters. I greeted them quietly each day. But behind their backs, the recorders were working. The first recording came late evening, filtered through static but clear in tone. "She's too old to notice," I heard my daughter-in-law say. Her voice brisk, matter-of-fact. "By the time she realizes she's broke, We'll have sold everything. Then we dump her in memory care, tell people she's confused, and keep the money. Simple. I pressed stop and sat still until I heard their bedroom door shut. The weight of the words hit me like cold rain. This was no argument, this was a plan. The next file came from downstairs. "She doesn't deserve rent credit," my son whispered to a man I could hear vaguely in the background. "She's dead weight. We keep her name off title and no one has to feel bad. The bank already approved the transfer once we pay them off in the autumn." There was mention of the passphrase I had used for the safe deposit key. Someone had asked for it. That meant they were counting on me not being around to sign anything. I did not confront them. I catalogued it. Then I called Maggie, the old friend, once a real estate attorney who had helped me with the title transfer when I gave the property to my son. I sent her the recordings, labeled by date and location. Within hours, Maggie called me back. "This is damning," she said. "If this is what it sounds like, you have grounds for immediate legal intervention. They are violating fiduciary duty and attempting fraud." She asked if I still had the original deed. Of course I did. I had a safe, password only I remembered. She wanted copies, and she said one phrase that felt cold in her kindness. "They will never see you coming." I spent the next 2 days gathering everything else. I retrieved bank statements. I verified the gambling debts they tried to hide. I found the paperwork for that personal mortgage note and the estimated sale price printed by their real estate agent with the line, "Anticipated closing before mother returns." Then I added my own documentation, the book of Christmas checks I donated each year, the letters from neighbors thanking me for baking cookies decades ago, the church bulletin I sponsored. I showed how I had built goodwill, credit, trust, and that I myself had been the one to secure this building years earlier under my maiden name. When I sent the final packet to Maggie, recordings, documents, archive deeds, invoice history, my hands trembled only slightly, because I knew exactly what I had. I did not need to run. I needed to stand. So I stood. I kept recording. Each day when they argued, the recorders caught the words they thought they spoke in private, the moments when condescending laughter slipped out, the admissions that I did not belong, that I had outlived my usefulness. They thought they were writing the final chapter. They put me into boxes. They dropped my frame photo in the grass. They missing-checked me on the title. They thought they had rewritten everything. But I had all the notes. Every word became a file. Every whisper a witness. I sat at the kitchen table each night, crossing off another date. Maggie said we could file a complaint, request a temporary restraining order, and freeze the transfer once we submit the evidence. And then, only then, the building would stop being their current project. But I did not push back immediately. I prepared, because when you aim to expose a lie, you do not just show the crack. You tear down the wall, and they had just helped me build it. Maggie was never the type to waste time. When she called me that Monday morning, her voice was tight with something between shock and delight. "You said they were renting, right?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "They moved in after their last place went into foreclosure." "Then you'll want to hear this. The building they live in, the one you used to own, is part of a redevelopment trust, and your name is still on record." I paused. "What kind of record?" She took a breath. "Do you remember a man named Ronald Templeton? Real estate investor. You worked with him back in the 80s? I nearly dropped the phone. Ronald was one of the few clients I advised personally when I was still in the financial world. He was rough around the edges but brilliant with property. We shared a philosophy: invest quietly, exit gracefully, and never let the sharks know you're still swimming. After I stepped back from my career, he'd insisted I remain tied into one of his long-term projects. Just a security blanket, he'd called it. I had almost forgotten. Maggie didn't. Turns out, Ronald built the complex your son rents in, and guess who owns a silent equity share in that property? I blinked. Me? You. Through a holding account still active under your maiden name. And here's the kicker. The building bylaws include a clause. If a tenant is found guilty of legal misconduct or fraud, especially toward a family member, the silent equity partner has the right to buy out the property under priority claim at current market rate. It took me a moment to breathe again. You mean I can buy the building? You do not just mean You are entitled to, and with the evidence you've collected, the fraud is undeniable. Between the unauthorized lien filings, the attempt to sell without consent, and the abusive conduct toward you as a former legal owner, we have more than enough." I was silent. My hands felt warm. "So," Maggie said, the smirk audible in her tone, "what do you want to do?" I did not hesitate. "Buy it." She laughed. "Thought you'd say that. The paperwork's already in motion. And Ronald? He remembered you. He said, and I quote, 'I always knew that woman would outlive the bastards.'" It took 3 days. 3 days for the documents to finalize, for Maggie and Ronald to co-sign the final transfer, for the bank to release the legal hold, for the management company to receive the official notification. Effective immediately, new ownership had taken over. My name. Mine. I sat in Maggie's office the afternoon the ink dried, holding a warm mug of chamomile as she slid the final envelope across the table. Inside were keys, a full set, labeled for every apartment, including one with a chipped brass tag, Unit 4B. My son's. Maggie tapped it. "This one is special," she said, "because now you are his landlord." I did not cry. I smiled, a deep, quiet smile. One that reached all the way back to the woman I had been before apron strings and polite thank yous replaced my name on the door. 3 hours later, a notice was slipped under their door. Effective immediately, due to confirmed legal and ethical violations, their lease would not be renewed. They had 30 days to vacate or face formal eviction proceedings. I made sure it was printed on paper with my letterhead, and at the bottom I included a short note. "This is not a charity, but thank you for reminding me who I am." They had no idea what hit them. But that was the beauty of silence. You never hear it coming until it is already over. It was the kind of event they loved, an open-air block party thrown by the condo board, full of cheap white wine and even cheaper conversation. My daughter-in-law wore a tight, lemon-shallow dress that shimmered like it belonged on a younger woman, and she held court near the grill like a queen expecting her crown. "We're finalizing the mortgage next week," she told the couple from 5C, her voice just loud enough to carry. "We're buying this place outright, finally gonna own our own home. No more rent, no more answering to landlords." There were scattered claps, a few polite congratulations. I stood quietly just beyond the buffet table, beneath the tent where they had parked the coolers and the sangria. I wore the same blue dress I wore to my son's wedding. It still fit. Maggie stood beside me, holding the official transfer document in a simple manila folder, sealed and notarized. Her shoes clicked loud against the pavement as she walked forward, the crowd parting like they felt the temperature drop. Then Ronald stepped up, his voice gravelly, commanding, and utterly impossible to ignore. "Pardon the interruption," he said. "I thought it would be polite to introduce the new owner of this property." My daughter-in-law laughed, her wine sloshing slightly. "Oh, what billionaire are we pretending showed up today?" Ronald smiled. He gestured behind him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "meet your new landlord, Mrs. Eleanor Reed." The laughter died. My son froze mid-bite. My daughter-in-law blinked, her lip curled in disbelief. "Wait," she said. "What?" I stepped forward, heels steady on the pavement, the dress catching just enough wind to feel regal. I reached into my bag and pulled out the papers. With Maggie's help, I lifted the document, title, signature, and seal clearly visible. "You have 14 days to vacate," I said, holding her gaze. "I suggest you start packing." There was a beat of silence. She laughed, high and brittle. "This is a joke?" "No," I said. "What you did to me was a joke. This is the punchline." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone from the HOA took a step closer, already scanning the document. My son opened his mouth, then shut it, then opened it again. "Mom," he whispered, "what the hell is this?" "This," I said evenly, "is your reminder that some artifacts cannot be buried. They rebuild, and then they reclaim." His hands trembled. Her jaw twitched. "Where are we supposed to go?" he muttered. You cannot just kick us out." One neighbor whispered, "Is that the same woman they used to call a haunted doll?" Someone else murmured, "She doesn't look haunted now. She looks like the ghost that came back for justice." And for a moment, just a breath, I stood, not as their burden, not as their shame, but as the story they were too blind to see. I did not need to shout, My silence was loud enough to echo. "I can," I replied, "and I am." She dropped her wine glass. It shattered against the sidewalk. He stared at me like he no longer recognized my face. "You raised me," he said. "You taught me how to ride a bike." "I also taught you how to respect what you were given," I said. "You failed both lessons." And then, without another word, I turned and walked back through the crowd. They did not stop me. They did not question me. They just watched. Because even in my silence, they knew I had never left. I had just been waiting for the right moment to come home. He showed up 2 days after the eviction notice took effect. It was early morning, before the sun had crested over the hibiscus trees, when I heard the knock on my new front door. Soft at first, then desperate, unhinged. I opened it with the screen door still locked, and there he stood, eyes bloodshot, hair wild, barefoot on the porch. "Mom," he breathed. Please talk to me." I said nothing, just waited. "I know we messed up," he continued, voice cracking. "But this, you ruined us. Over a stupid apartment and some old books?" His hands trembled at his sides, and I saw him, truly saw him, for the first time in years. Not as my boy, not as my mistake, but as a man who made a choice. Again and again. "No," I said quietly. "You ruined yourself the moment you mistook your mother for clutter." He blinked, stunned. "We were drowning in debt. We had no choice." "You had every choice," I replied. "You could have asked. You could have told the truth. But instead you lied. You sold my memories. You dismantled your own history." He stepped closer. "So what now? You're just cutting me out of your life?" "No," I said. "I'm simply no longer pretending you deserve a place in mine." I handed him a white envelope. Inside was a notarized amendment to my will. "I've removed you from all future inheritance, effective immediately. The trust fund, the land in Tallahassee, the securities account, it all goes to someone who has shown me kindness." His fingers clutched the paper like it might burn him. "To who?" he demanded. "That little neighbor girl with the peanut butter sandwiches." "Yes," I said. "The only person who brought me lunch when I was invisible in your house." He looked like he had been slapped. "You're giving everything to a stranger's kid?" I shook my head. "She's not a stranger. She listened. She remembered. She called me Grandma when you wouldn't even call me human." He collapsed onto the steps, hands in his hair. "I needed you," he whispered. "I needed help. And I was there," I said, "until you made me disappear." Later that week he called again, not to apologize, not to ask forgiveness, to negotiate. But I was not the one who picked up the phone. My young neighbor did, the one who had helped me plant marigolds last spring, the one who asked for stories about the Great Recession for her school report, the one who came every Sunday with a sandwich, an apple, and a drawing of a cat that looked more like a raccoon. She answered my phone with the poise of someone raised by truth. "She's not available," she said. "She's finally being treated like treasure, not trash." And then she hung up. That night, we drank cocoa on the porch, the air smelling of salt and old magnolia blossoms. She asked me how it felt to be the owner of a building. I said it felt like coming home. She smiled and said, "Good, because you built everything anyway." And in that moment I knew. I had not lost a son. I had gained the one thing I never thought I would again, a legacy worth loving. Spring came softly, as if tiptoeing through the wreckage. The kind of spring that did not ask for applause, but offered quiet resurrection. I spent the first weeks after the eviction planting things. Lavender, snapdragons, milkweed, sunflowers, all from seeds I'd kept for decades, in a mason jar labeled simply Later. Later had finally arrived. I did not just reclaim my life, I repurposed it. The apartment that once felt like a cage, where whispers turned to schemes and respect went to die, became something else under my care. With help from Maggie and a few of her connections, I registered it as a private, transitional residence for older women. Ones like me. Ones who had been cast out, dismissed, or replaced by younger, shinier things. I called it the Second Bloom. Our first resident was a retired nurse whose son sold her trailer while she was in the hospital. Then came a librarian whose stepdaughter claimed she forgot too many things to live alone. One by one, the rooms filled not with grief but with stories, with second chances. I cooked breakfast every Sunday. We took turns tending the garden, and I taught them how to file their taxes online. Some had never used a computer. Some had never been told they were valuable once they turned 70. Meanwhile, I volunteered at the public library twice a week, not to shelf books, but to teach. The children called me Miss Ellie. I spoke to them about invisible inheritance, not money, but manners, not things, but thought, not property, but presence. We created a workbook together. It was called What Stays When Things Go. Inside were drawings, recipes, poems, and letters from kids asking how to never forget their grandmas. One boy wrote, "When I grow up, I'll never throw my grandma away, even if she smells like cinnamon and old paper." I kept that one on my fridge. In the courtyard behind the second bloom, we planted a circular garden with a single iron bench. At its center stood a wooden sign, hand-carved by the same neighbor girl, who now called every Sunday like clockwork. It read, "Dedicated to the relics they tried to erase and the women who reclaimed their value." Sometimes I sit there with a cup of tea and just breathe. I do not replay the cruelty anymore. I do not need to. The story wrote itself out, and the ending did not need a courtroom or a victory lap. Just a truth spoken out loud, finally, after all those years of whispering in kitchens and crying in parked cars. They thought they could exile me with silence, but I had spent a lifetime listening. They thought they could erase me by labeling me obsolete, but I was never a decoration, never a burden, never just an old woman in a rocking chair. I was the ledger keeper, the foundation stone, the one who stayed when others ran, and now, every time a woman walks through the doors of the second bloom, she is reminded that her story did not end where they tried to stop it. It just got quiet enough for her to rewrite it. They thought I was an artifact. I was the only one still holding value. _ 6 months passed. I had not heard from my son again, not directly. He moved 2 counties over, someone told me. Started working at a used car lot. My daughter-in-law filed for divorce a month later. I did not celebrate. I did not mourn. I just made a note in my garden logbook. Winter came early this year. Some things do not bloom twice, but other things did. The neighbor girl, her name was Lila, started spending more time at the second bloom. At first, she helped file papers and alphabetize pantry donations, but soon she stayed for other reasons. She liked the way the women talked to her, like she mattered. She liked the stories, the embroidery lessons, the way we let her braid our hair, even if her hands were clumsy. One day, I found her sitting with a woman named Rose. Rose was a former church secretary, sharp as a tack but too tired to fight her own eviction. Lila was reading aloud from Rose's favorite book, her voice clear and steady. "She said she wants to help record everyone's story," Rose told me later. "Says the world forgets too easy." That night, I wrote Lila into the trust, not just as a beneficiary, as a steward. "You don't have to be related to carry someone's legacy," I told her. "Blood doesn't mean loyalty, but kindness writes history." We started hosting Sunday teas. No RSVP, no rules. Just hot drinks, real china, and a folding table in the garden, where old women and young girls could trade recipes, jokes, and lessons too long buried. Leela ran the sign-in sheet. One Sunday, 33 people came. I stopped wearing black. I stopped counting the years I lost. Instead, I counted blooms. The begonias by the porch, the rosemary by the kitchen, the orange tree that finally bore fruit after 2 decades of stubborn silence. One day, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single sentence. "I remember the porch swing. I hope one day you'll let me sit beside you again." No signature, but I knew the hand. I folded the letter once, then twice, and placed it in the box under my bed marked Unfinished Business. Not out of anger, not anymore. I had learned something even sharper than revenge. I had learned peace. But peace too has teeth. Peace means building something no one can tear down. Not with slurs, not with silence, not even with bloodlines. Peace is knowing I left a map for someone else to follow. And so I write, each morning, a little more of this story down. Not because I am afraid it will be forgotten, but because I know now someone will remember. __. If this story stirred something in your heart, if it made you remember a name, a face, a voice that once got pushed aside, then I hope you carry it with you, because there are thousands of women like me, quiet in the corner, underestimated in their own homes, mistaken for background noise. But we remember everything, and sometimes we don't get angry, we just wait. Then, one day, we take it all back, with silence, with grace, and with a signature. Thank you for listening to Grandma True Stories, where real stories of dignity, betrayal, and justice live on, one voice at a time. If you want more true stories like this, of women who were forgotten but never finished, subscribe to this channel. Hit that bell icon so you never miss a tale that matters. Because revenge has no expiration date, and when a grandma speaks, the world finally listens.